Vayikach Yisro Chosein Moshe es Sipora Eshes Moshe Achashluchero. Yisro, the father of Moshe, again he's referred to continuously as the father of Moshe, just to explain the way he's priding himself. Sipora, the wife of Moshe, after she was sent away. Okay, this is the first time the Torah is revealing to us that Moshe had sent her away, had sent her back. Initially, the Torah tells us how he was told by Hashem at the burning of the bush, he has to go back to Canaan to redeem his brothers. He goes to his father-in-law, gets permission, goes to her with the donkey, where he's nearly killed. Zipporah circumcises the child. There's no mention anymore of what happened. But now the Torah is revealing to us that Yisro was coming with his daughter after Moshe had sent her away. So Rashi over here says, when Hashem had said to Moshe, return to Egypt, Moshe took his wife and his children and his sons. Aaron went towards Moshe, and he met him at Har Elokim. This is the first time Aaron sees Moshe's family. He says, who are these people? This is my wife who I married in Midian, and these are my children. Where are you taking them to? I'm taking them to Egypt. We're paying for the ones who were there already, the original ones. And you bring more Jews to Egypt. I mean, there are enough Jews in Egypt. Do you have to bring more? So when he heard this from Aaron, so he says, return to your father's home. So at that point, she took her two children. She returned to her father's home, to Yisro. So now Yisro is taking Zipporah, the wife of Moshe, after she was sent away. But the Torah now is the first time it's revealing that she was sent back. Now let's understand. Moshe understood to a degree what Egypt was all about. He had fled Egypt. He understood what power was. And when he left, he wasn't an ordinary person, not only because he was a prince. When he killed the Egyptian who had raped the Jewish woman, it says he killed him with the name of Hashem. So he was a person who had an understanding of the spiritual realm at that point. Moshe was born with the Shekhinah. So Moshe had an understanding of what the evil of Egypt was about. Before Moshe met his brother now, on the way back, Moshe understood where he was taking his family. The Jews are in bondage. And God explained everything to him, what was going on, why he has to go then, in times of the essence. And despite knowing all that, he's taking his wife and children to Egypt. And he knows his brothers are in what? Are in bondage. And he knows they're at a point of what? They became idolaters. They became acculturated due to the bondage. He knows all that. But yet, despite that, he's bringing his wife and children to Egypt. Aaron says to him, we're paying enough for the Jews that are there. Do you have to add to them? Moshe heard it, sent them back. What was the original consideration, and what did he understand afterwards, which he agreed that he should not bring him there? What was the value of bringing him there? I mean, what did Moshe have to bring his children there? He could have left his wife and children with his father-in-law, gone, and after leaving Egypt, he could have called for them. But what do you do now? He took them, they should accompany him there. Moshe understood where was he going. He was going to perform miracles, the 10 plagues, which ultimately would start weaning the Jews of their idolatrous beliefs, being exposed to every plague which was clearly the hand of Hashem. And as we discussed, that all 10 of them, all 10 Makos, each one addressed another aspect of existence, but the final conclusion was that there's no area, there's no realm of existence which Hashem doesn't control. To deny his children and wife that level of exposure and experience, to see this, Moshe felt, regardless what Egypt is, it's worthwhile to take his children there. But he was focused on the value of them being exposed to the hand of Hashem. These are miracles which never ever took place in existence since the beginning of existence. The hand of Hashem to be seen at this level. Therefore, Moshe decided he's taking them. But his focus was they'll be beneficiaries of seeing the hand of Hashem. That was the focus. Aaron says that may be a focus, but if you would focus on the negative side, on the environment, in terms of what Egypt represents, he says it's not worth it. Whatever they'll see in terms of the hand of Hashem, if you understand what the negative is, and I've been there, and it's intensified, since you've been away, I'm there, as they said, on the reality level, it's not worth it. Whenever you understand the value of seeing the hand of Hashem, to witness things which never ever happened in existence, it's not worth it. Moshe understood it. Moshe agreed, sent them back. That was the original consideration. The original consideration was the 10 plagues. And the 10 plagues, there's a question whether 10, were there 50 plagues in Egypt. How many plagues were in Egypt? 4. Was it 40? Whatever it was. Aaron says it's not worth it. We're paying for those who are there. You're coming to bring more Jews into that level of exposure. The Levium were not part of the bondage, but yet they were impacted by being in Egypt. They did not become idolaters, but just being in that environment actually impacted and affected their degree of spirituality. It's not worth it. That's what Aaron's saying. As a Levi, Aaron's a Levi. So Aaron, Moshe's children will be no different than their father, their Levium. And besides that, when Moshe came to Egypt, there was no longer a bondage. Soon afterwards, the bondage stopped, the physical work. So just being in that environment, he says, it's not worth it. You're bringing more. And her 2 children. Yisro was bringing Tzipporah, the wife of Moshe, and her 2 sons. Asher Shemo Echad Gershom, Kioma Geri Shiveres Nochrio. The Torah is revealing is giving the background why Gershom was called Gershom with a mem. I was a stranger in an alien land, in a foreign land. V'shemo Echad Eliezer, Ki Elokei Ovi Be'ezri Ve'yitzlin B'cherev Paro. The other one, Shemo Echad, Eliezer. Of course, the God of my father came to my aid, and I was saved from the sword of Paro. Let's just read the Rashi of Dalid, because sequentially it's out of order. Because, as Rashi says, what's Vayitzelim B'cherev Paro? I was saved from the sword of Paro. Kishegilu does la'aviram al dvar bitzri. When Dustin Vir informed of him regarding the issue of the Egyptian who Moshe killed, Ubikesh Laragos Moshe, Paro had given the order that Moshe should be killed. Nasit Savoro Kamut Shel Shayish. His neck, they wanted to decapitate him. His neck became like a pillar of marble. It's a miracle. So he was saved from the sword of Paro. So sequentially, which one happened first? He was saved from the sword of Paro. So his first son, he should have named Eliezer, Elokei Ovi Be'ezri, God came to my assistance, and I was able to escape, and I was safe from the sword of Paro. And then, when he arrived in Midian, I was a stranger in this foreign land. But yet, the first son is Eliezer, is Gershom, and the second son is Eliezer. The question is why?
Wasn't he a stranger in Egypt first before? I'm sorry, forgive me.
Moshe was not an ordinary person. Moshe, firstly, he married the daughter of the sheik of Midian. Moshe was in a very good position. He wasn't a person who was not noticed. We find later that when Balak did his homework on why the Jews were succeeding to such a degree, he had found out that the power of the Jews lies in their leader, whose power is in his mouth. His mouth is very powerful. He's able to bring about phenomenal things. And they did their homework on Moshe. That Moshe himself, that he was able to take the Jews out of Egypt, was due to his ability, his verbally, his expression of speech could bring about miracles. Therefore, they had to commission Bilam, whose power also lied in his mouth. So he did his homework. Where did he do his homework? He did his homework in Midian. He checked out Midian, and the people says the man is a miracle man because his power lies in his mouth. So Moshe was a known entity there. He was a known entity. And when a person is accepted in a community, and you feel, and you're recognized and valued, what happens? It's easy to acclimate. You acclimate very easily. If a person is in an alien environment and you start acclimating and you start feeling comfortable and you don't feel that you don't belong there, what happens? The effect of the community begins affecting you. There's that, as I said, that subliminal erosion of who you are. Moshe never wanted to forget who he was and what Midian was. I'm a stranger in this alien location. The firstborn of a person is always the most special of his children. Eliezer represents, I don't belong here. Regardless of my level of accomplishment, regardless of my acclaim in Midian, and the way people value me and respect me, I don't belong here. This is not my place. Because the moment the person forgets that that's not his place, immediately the regression starts at some level. Moshe never wanted to forget that. Therefore, even though sequentially the events are not in order, but that's first and foremost. Therefore, the second child is Eliezer Elikei Ovi Bezri. God saved me from the sword of Paro. So where the Sipuna learns, my question is only a question of Rashi's interpretation. That he's going, what's the sword of Paro? Because when he killed the Egyptian, the verdict was Paro gave the order, have him decapitated. I was saved, so that came first. The Sipuna learns, the tentacles of Paro covered that whole area, the whole Middle East. You couldn't escape from the clutches of Paro. He had his people. So even Moshe fled from Egypt. Paro could have found Moshe and have him executed, have him taken out. So when it says I was saved from the sword of Paro, that all these years after I escaped and continuously, I was protected from the sword of Paro, not in Egypt, in Midian. So first thing, I came to this location, I was what Gerahis Beretz Nochriya. That's first. Secondly, although Paro could have come after me in Egypt, because he has his people, his tentacles were all over, Hashem protected me, I was safe from the sword of Paro. So therefore, according to the Sifarno, which he's going according to simple understanding without the Midrash, sequentially, it really is in order for that reason. So the question Maral asks, why did Moshe marry a convert And because he married that woman without that special pedigree, his children were ordinary. And you can't say because he had no choice, because he was stranded in a location, there were no Jewish women. There were no people of that pedigree. Because if Moshe, being that special person, was meant to have the special children, God would have provided him with a Jewish woman with that special pedigree. So evidently, if Hashem did not, it was for a reason. The question is, what is the reason? So Maral answers what Alan is saying. And Baruch Hashem, he remembers it well. The Maral says, we just had, when Yisro had heard all that Hashem had done on behalf of Moshe and Yisrael Amod. So Rashi says, from there we see that Moshe Shokol Keneged Yisrael. Rashi, at the beginning of the parsha. Moshe's dimension of spirituality was the equivalent of the whole Jewish people combined. Every tribe, the spirituality of every tribe, although we have 12 tribes, each tribe in its own right was unique in its own persona of spirituality. Each of them complements the other to create the totality of Jewish people. Yehuda was not Levi, and Levi was not Yisachar. Each one had their unique profile within spirituality. Combined, complementing one another, the totality is called the Jewish people. Moshe Rabbeinu was the totality of the Jewish people. As a result of that, every person who is a member of the Jewish people had his profile was within limitation. Moshe Rabbeinu's spirituality was not within limitation. He was the totality. So to marry a woman who is limited because she has that very specific spiritual profile, Moshe could have married that woman, because that would have somehow hindered and put limitation on Moshe. Zipporah not having any genetic pedigree. As a result of that, as I said, she was like a clean slate. So she would be imprinted with the spirituality of Moshe Rabbeinu. But nevertheless, she is who she is. She doesn't have that special pedigree. Therefore, as a result of that, for the child to be special, she has to have that special pedigree, which she didn't. But because of the circumstance of Moshe being the totality, the only woman who was qualified for him to marry was only the convert, who did not have that limitation, and therefore he had to marry Zipporah. That's the Maral of Prague. To answer. The Gemara in Bracha says that the only area that still has relevance to prophetic or divine inspiration, which every parent has, is when a parent names a child. Because the Gemara tells us that the name of a child, what lies within the name, is the destiny, the spiritual destiny of that person. So the Orach Chaim HaKadosh explains that why does a parent pick a name? Why does that name enter into that mind of the parent when they name the child? Hashem puts that name in their mind. Of course, they have a reason. It's a grandfather, but there are many reasons why you pick a name. But they felt that should be the appropriate name. That name that the parents choose for a child, the destiny of that child lies within that name. And it's based on a pasuk. So the Gemara says, why did Rus have David HaMelech? Because the name Rus, what it connotes is she's going to have a grandchild who's going to be Merava Hashem B'Shiras Shebachos. She's going to have a grandchild who will sate God in song and praise. That lies within the name Rus. That's the destiny that indicates what kind of special grandchild she's going to have. He's what? He's the one who wrote Tehillim. Right? That's the ultimate in Shiras Shishmochos, in song and praise. Therefore, in her name, it already was predestined that David should be her grandchild. That's the Gemara. But the question is, but she was a convert. Right? Now, who was Rus's grandfather? You know who he was? Balak. Balak merited, if you remember, when Moshe Rabbeinu was told to destroy Midian because of what happened, right? So Rashi cites the Midrash. What about Moab? The daughters of Moab, they themselves, they seduced the men. And if not for Pinchas's intervention, his zealotry, the Jewish people would have been destroyed. So why didn't he tell Moshe destroy Moab? Right? Rashi cites the Medrash. The Medrash answers that since there had to be that special woman born from Moab, who's Rusa Movia, so if Moab would have been destroyed, not having a survivor, there would be a Rus. And there has to be a Rus because there has to be a David. That's the answer. That's why Moshe was not told to destroy Moab. But again, because Rus, so Rus is that special person. So you say, even though she's a convert, nevertheless, within Rus lies the name that she will have a child who's destined to save God in song and praise. So Moab, Balak was her what? Her grandfather. Why did Balak merit to have such a special granddaughter? Do you know why? So the Gemara tells us in Nazir, we'll get there, but in the Daf Yomi eventually, not too far off, because Balak was initially, they were idolaters. Bilam had advised Balak to build 7 altars and bring sacrifices to God, to Hashem, and maybe we'll be able to convince Hashem to destroy the Jewish people. So it took Shlo Lishmo. Factually, he brought these sacrifices for God, not for a deity, L'havdin. Although it was with an ulterior motive. It wasn't purely for the sake of believing in God. It was with an ulterior motive to be able to destroy the Jewish people. So Rav says, what do we learn from there? That's the takeaway from the story of Balak. The reason why Balak merited to have Rus HaMovia, to be his granddaughter, because Balak, this pagan king who commissioned Bilam to destroy the Jewish people, he brought sacrifices for God. In that merit, he had Rus HaMovia. That's the Gemara. So you're right. Under normal circumstances, that person, that type of pedigree doesn't produce this. But because over here, he represents he's the king and he's a pagan, and despite that, he does such a special act multiple times, bringing Karbonos sacrifice for Hashem, and that merit, he merited to have that granddaughter, Rus HaMovia, who's the grandmother of David HaMelech. But without that, you'd have a question. But that's the answer. That's why that's the exception.
Why wasn't it her son?
Rabbi, I have another question.
Wait. Before you go ahead, Alan.
So why wasn't it her son? Why is it her great grandson? I mean, it's way down the line. Yishai was one of the people who didn't sin. I mean, he was a special person. But you would have thought it would be the son. Why is it 3 generations later?
You know, the question you're asking is why David had the most special soul, one of the most special souls ever come to existence. The years he had was 70 years that Adam Arishan had given, because David was only meant to live a few hours. But when Adam had seen the special soul of David, and he asked Hashem, who is this? So Hashem says, it's a very special soul, but he's only going to live a few hours. Adam was meant to live 1,000 years. Adam says, I'm willing to give 70 years of my life to that soul, that person should be able to live 70 years. David lived exactly 70 years. But those years that he lived were Adam's years. So the question is, why did he only come on the scene when he did? Why he should have come on the scene a little bit earlier? We have no idea why, when a person comes on the scene. We have no idea. I'll give you an example. The Vilna Gaon, he argues with Rishonim. We know that is a concept known as the Skatno Adoros, that as we further ourselves from Sinai, the generations are less and less, spiritually speaking. But yet the Vilna Gaon, Rav Chaim Volozhin says, was at the level of the Rashba. Rav Shlomo ben Aderes was a contemporary of the Ramban, of Nachmanides. Now, so they asked the Chofetz Chaim, he was born out of his generation. He should have been born generations earlier. He was born in the generation that such people don't come into existence any longer. That means he was born with a special neshama. Why? So firstly says, the Chofetz Chaim said, that majority of people, 99.99% of people are all Gilgulim, reincarnations. All people are reincarnations. We've been here before. So when we come back, we're coming back as human beings to correct something which was not fully corrected or accomplished in the previous life. But we're coming back as a sliver of our original soul. It's not that soul. The Vilna Gaon, his soul was a pure, was never here before. And because it was that special neshama, therefore his capacity, spiritually speaking, was another level of capacity. That's what the Chofetz Chaim explained. And the Chofetz Chaim said that why was he born in that particular time? If you read historically speaking, the Vilna Gaon was born after we find that after their terrible Holocaust, which happened in the 1600s, there were the Chelmnitsky, which was the Machshmo, was equivalent of Hitler. He wiped out most of Eastern Europe. He was a Tatar. And most of the Jewish communities in Europe were destroyed. What happened right after that? There was such a resurgence of Torah, because there was such a void and vacuum. Hashem provided sent special souls to the world. We have the Shach, who's the main commentary on Shulchan Aruch, Rav Shapsi Cohen. You have the Taz. You had certain people who came on the scene, and in the early 1800s, you had the Tzos and the Nesivos. You had people, which this caliber of people to all be in one generation never happened before. The Vilna Gaon came a little bit before, because we had to reestablish that special dimension of Torah, because the Gaon was head and shoulders above anybody. Nobody was able in Torah, in the revealed Torah, in the hidden Torah. Nobody was the equivalent of the Vilna Gaon, because Torah had to be reestablished to be at that magnificent, magnanimous level to be able to launch it for the future generations. That's what the Chofetz Chaim said. So people come on the scene at certain times because only God knows. So David was born at that particular time and not generations earlier, as I said, because that's what he was meant. For whatever reason, that special soul was meant to manifest itself a few generations after Rus HaMovia, not to be the direct child of Rus, for whatever reason.